The moment my son decided my life for me, I was standing in the corner of my own living room, my fingers resting lightly against the wall to steady myself, listening to everyone else talk about beaches and sunlight as if I wasn't even there, as if I had already been quietly removed from whatever future they were planning together. There were 13 of them gathered comfortably, leaning into cushions, passing around printed travel plans, pointing at photos of blue water and hotel rooms, laughing in that easy, familiar way, and I stood there watching, waiting for someone to look at me the way they used to, but no one did. And then, without meaning to interrupt, without even raising my voice, I said it: I've never seen the ocean. Just a simple truth, something I had carried for years, shaped by every trip they took without me, every time I stayed behind while they packed and left. For a brief second, the room paused, just long enough for me to feel it, that small, fragile moment where I thought maybe someone had heard me. But then the smiles came, and the laughter followed, light at first, then spreading as if I had said something small, something that didn't matter. My son didn't even fully turn toward me when he answered, his voice calm, almost gentle. It might be a bit difficult this time. You know how things get, someone has to stay back. And that was it, no discussion, no hesitation, just a quiet decision placed in the air like it had already been agreed upon. I looked at them, at the same children I had stayed awake for when they were sick, the same ones I had held through fevers and fears, the nights I had sat beside their beds when they couldn't sleep. And not one of them spoke, not one of them said I should come, not one of them even met my eyes. That silence settled heavier than anything he could have said. And in that moment, something inside me shifted, not loudly, not suddenly, just quietly, like a truth finally settling into place. I wasn't part of their plans, I was the reason their plans had limits. I lowered myself slowly into the chair beside me, adjusting the blanket over my knees so they wouldn't notice the slight tremble in my hands. Because at my age, you learn how to hold your emotions still, how to let them pass through you without making anyone uncomfortable. But as I leaned forward, I felt it, a hand wrapping around my wrist, fragile but firm, stopping me, and when I looked up, I saw my mother watching me, truly watching me, her eyes clear in a way I hadn't seen in months, sharp, steady, aware. She pulled me closer, her voice barely more than a breath but steady enough that every word stayed with me. Start paying attention now. Just 5 words, simple, but something in the way she said them made my chest tighten because it didn't feel like advice, it felt like a warning. 4 days later, I understood. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind where the house feels too still, where even the air seems to pause, and I walked into my son's study to leave a cup of tea on his desk, something I had done for years without thinking, and that's when I noticed it, a piece of paper slightly out of place, tucked halfway under a folder. I almost ignored it, I really did, but something about it made me stop, the way it sat there, just visible enough to be seen, just hidden enough to feel wrong. I picked it up slowly, my fingers tightening slightly as I looked at it. A receipt, a large amount, my eyes moving over the numbers, my breathing changing without me realizing it, and then I saw the name. Sunrise Memory Care Facility. The room felt smaller in that moment, the walls closer, the air heavier, and when I looked at the date, my breath caught. It was the same day as the meeting, the same afternoon they sat together deciding who would go and who would stay. I stood there holding that paper, and something inside me went very still because I had spent years caring for people older than me. I had seen real memory loss, real confusion, the slow fading that comes with time, and I knew something they didn't expect me to understand. I knew the difference between someone. That night I didn't sleep. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses into your ears, and I lay there staring into the dark, replaying everything, every conversation, every glance that suddenly felt different now that I was looking at it closely. My mother's voice stayed with me: start paying attention now. And so I did. I began noticing the things I had ignored before, the way my son checked my medication without asking, the way conversations softened or stopped when I entered the room, the way my daughter smiled too quickly and changed the subject before I could finish speaking. And then one evening, I saw something that didn't belong. A new pill bottle. I picked it up slowly, reading the label carefully, feeling something shift deeper inside me as I understood what it was: something for sleep, something strong enough to make a person heavily drowsy, but I hadn't asked for it, I hadn't needed it. And in that moment, the uneasiness I had been trying to ignore became something clearer, sharper, because this wasn't forgetfulness, this wasn't care, this felt arranged. That was the night I made a quiet decision. I would not question them, not yet, if they believed I wasn't paying attention. If they thought I was too old to understand what was happening, then I would let them believe it, but from that moment on, I started watching, carefully, silently. I began keeping track of everything, every pill, every conversation, every small shift in the way they treated me, because something had already been set in motion, and they were certain I wouldn't notice. They were wrong. They thought everything was already decided. They had no idea I had. The first time I knew something was truly wrong. Not just a feeling, not just suspicion, but something real and undeniable. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, so ordinary that anyone else might have missed it. But once you start paying attention, even the smallest moments begin to change. My son came over after church, just like he always did, arriving at the same time, moving through the house with quiet confidence, asking the same questions in the same tone, as if everything was normal, as if nothing had shifted at all. I was sitting in the living room working on a crossword puzzle, the sunlight stretching across the floor in long, quiet lines, when he walked in and smiled at me. "How are you feeling today?" he asked, and I said, "I'm fine," because I was clear, I was present, I was exactly who I had always been. He nodded and reached for the container where my daily pills were kept. "I'll take care of these," he said, simple, helpful, the kind of thing a caring son would do. And I let him. I watched without looking, like I was watching, heard the soft rattle of pills, the quiet sound of water pouring into a glass, movements so normal they wouldn't mean anything unless you were already paying attention. He handed them to me, his expression calm. "These will help you rest," he said, and I hesitated just for a moment, not long enough for him to notice. Then I took them because at that time I still trusted him. The next thing I remember clearly was waking up in the dark, the room dim, the light outside already fading. And for a moment I didn't understand why my body felt so heavy, why my thoughts moved slower, like I had been pulled out of something deep. I sat up slowly, my head slightly foggy. "What time is it?" I asked, and he answered from across the room, "Evening." And when I looked at the clock, something inside me went very quiet. Hours had passed, completely gone, with nothing left behind, no memory, no sense of time, just an empty space where my afternoon should have been. The next Sunday it happened again, same visit, same tone, same pills, and again the hours disappeared. But this time when I woke up, I didn't ask questions, I didn't show confusion. I simply listened to my body, to the heaviness, to the unnatural stillness in my thoughts. And something inside me became very still, very certain this wasn't normal. By the third Sunday, I was ready. When he handed me the pills, I held them in my hand just a little longer, feeling their shape, their weight, my eyes resting on them long enough to notice the way he watched me. Just for a moment before speaking again, softer this time, "It'll help you." And I nodded, lifting the glass, letting him see what he expected to see, tilting my head just enough to make it believable, but I didn't swallow them. That afternoon, I stayed awake. Completely awake. No heaviness. No fog. No missing time. Just silence and the quiet sound of him moving through the house, opening drawers, closing them, checking things that didn't need checking, footsteps that didn't belong to a simple visit. And I sat there without moving, my hands resting in my lap, my breathing steady, my mind clear. And in that stillness, everything became undeniable. This wasn't care. This wasn't concern. This was something controlled, something planned, something deliberate. They weren't just leaving me behind anymore. They were creating a version of me that didn't exist, one that could be explained, managed, removed. And in that moment, I made another decision. I would not confront them, not yet, because now I understood something they didn't. The truth wasn't in what they were saying. It was in what they thought I couldn't see. And if I stayed quiet, the moment I realized it wasn't just Sundays, Something inside me changed, not panic, not fear, just awareness, the kind that settles quietly and doesn't leave. I began noticing things I had overlooked before, small shifts, barely visible, the way my tea sometimes carried a faint bitterness, the way my body would grow heavy in the middle of the day without reason, not tired, but pulled downward, like something inside me was being dimmed slowly, carefully. I didn't write anything down, I didn't say a word, I just kept it all in my mind. Because at my age, you learn something important: truth doesn't always need noise, it just needs patience. By the middle of the week, the pattern became clearer, not random, not careless, but timed, spaced just enough to look natural to anyone who wasn't paying attention. One afternoon, I pretended to be asleep in my chair, my breathing slow, my hands still, and I heard them in the next room, their voices low, controlled. My daughter spoke first. She slept again today, and my son answered after a pause. It's better this way, it makes things easier. Easier. The word stayed with me. It didn't sound worried. It didn't sound uncertain. It sounded decided. I opened my eyes later the way they expected me to, slowly, slightly confused, and they looked at me with that same careful softness, the kind reserved for someone fragile, someone fading. And in that moment, I saw it clearly, not in what they said, but in how they looked at me. They were already beginning to believe the version of me they were creating. That night I sat alone with the pill bottle in my hands, turning it slightly, feeling its weight, understanding something I hadn't wanted to admit before, something quiet but undeniable. I wasn't forgetting. I was being made to seem like I was. And once that truth settled in, calm and cold, everything else began to fall into place. This wasn't about helping me, this wasn't about care, this was about shaping a story, one that would make sense to anyone looking from the outside. A story where I was already fading. And if that story was being built this carefully, then something was waiting at the end of it. We drove longer than usual that afternoon, longer than any simple outing needed to be, and I sat quietly beside him, watching the familiar streets disappear one by one, replaced by roads I didn't recognize, until finally the car slowed, turned, and stopped. And that's when I saw it. Sunrise Memory Care Facility. I didn't react, not a breath, not a movement, but inside something tightened and held. He stepped out, came around to my side, his hand gentle on my arm. "Just a quick visit," he said softly, and I nodded because by then I understood something: the less you resist, the more people reveal. Inside, the air was clean, almost too clean, carrying that faint sterile scent that lingers in places where time feels slower. The floors shined, the walls were soft in color, everything carefully designed to feel calm, and yet beneath it something else lingered, something quieter. A woman greeted us with a practiced smile, her voice warm, controlled, and my son spoke for me before I could say anything. "She's been more forgetful lately, sleeping a lot." And I stood there listening to my life being explained in a way that didn't belong to me. We walked down a hallway lined with half-open doors, glimpses of paused lives inside, a chair facing a window, a blanket folded too neatly, a silence that didn't feel peaceful, and then I saw her. An elderly woman sitting in a wheelchair, her hands resting in her lap, her eyes open but not present. She wasn't looking at anything. She wasn't waiting. She was just there. "You'll be comfortable here," my son said quietly beside me. I didn't answer, because in that moment I understood something fully for the first time. This wasn't a place you visit. This was a place you are left. On the drive back, he spoke gently, explaining, soft words, careful tone. "It's just an option." But his voice didn't match what I had seen: the receipt, the pills, the conversations, the way they spoke when they thought I wasn't listening. This wasn't an option. This was already decided. And as I sat there looking out the window, watching the world pass by as if nothing had changed, a thought settled into me, steady and clear. The moment I stopped feeling like something was wrong and started knowing it, everything became quieter inside me, clearer, sharper, because once you understand the truth, you don't need to react, you just need to see. I moved differently after that, slower on the outside, exactly how they expected, but inside I was watching everything, every word, every movement, every moment they thought I wasn't paying attention. I stopped taking the pills. Not once. Not after that. And the difference was immediate. No heaviness, no missing hours, no fog, just clarity, steady and undeniable. And that alone told me everything I needed to know. One afternoon, when the house was quiet, I walked into my son's study again, not hesitating this time, not questioning whether I should, because by then I understood whatever line existed before they had already crossed it. The papers were there, more organized now, but not hidden, not really, because they didn't think they needed to hide them from me. I opened the folder slowly, and there it was. Not just a receipt this time, but documents, forms, everything prepared, my name written clearly at the top, details filled in, clinical, precise, final. Progressive cognitive decline. Needs supervised care. Family unable to provide full-time support. I read each line carefully, not rushing, not reacting, just letting the words settle because this wasn't confusion anymore, this was construction, a version of me built on paper, ready to replace the real one. I placed everything back exactly as it was, every edge aligned, every paper untouched, because now I understood something even more important. Knowing wasn't enough, I needed time, I needed control. I needed to be ready before they made their final move. That night I sat alone in my room, the house quiet around me, and I looked at my hands, steady, still mine, and one thought rose above everything else, clear and impossible to ignore. They were preparing to take my voice away. Slowly, carefully, in a way that would make it seem like I had already lost it. And as that truth settled into me, something shifted, not fear, not anger, something. The moment I decided to stop watching and start acting, it didn't feel dramatic, it didn't feel sudden. It felt quiet, controlled, like something inside me had finally settled into place after days of waiting. Because once you understand what's being done to you, hesitation becomes the only real danger. I didn't confront them, I didn't change my behavior in any obvious way. I did the opposite. I became exactly what they expected, slower in my movements, softer in my voice, just forgetful enough to make them comfortable because comfort makes people careless and I needed them careless. I began with something small, something they would never notice. I moved one document from the folder, not enough to raise suspicion, just enough to see how closely they were paying attention. And days passed, nothing changed, no questions, no tension, just the same calm routine. And that told me everything I needed to know. They believed I was already gone in the ways that mattered. That was when I made my next move. I made a call. Not long, not complicated, just enough, my voice steady, clear, speaking to someone I trusted, someone who knew me before any of this began, someone who would hear the difference between truth and performance. And I didn't explain everything, not yet. I simply asked for help in a way that couldn't be misunderstood. After that, I returned the phone exactly where it had been, sat back in my chair and waited. Days passed, and I continued as before, taking the pills in front of them, hiding them when they weren't looking, letting my steps slow when they were watching, allowing small moments of confusion to slip through, just enough to confirm what they already believed. And slowly I saw it happen, their guard lowering, their voices more open, their movements less careful. One evening I heard them again, not whispering this time, just speaking quietly in the next room, my daughter's voice uncertain. Are we doing the right thing? And my son answering calm, firm, it's already done, we just need to move forward. Already done, the words settled heavily because that meant something was closer than I thought, something final. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid. Because I was ready. Because now, for the first time since this began, the day everything began to unravel didn't start with shouting or confrontation. It started quietly, like every other day, the kind of normal that hides what's about to change. My son came into the house earlier than usual, his movements quicker, less controlled. A tension in the way he set his keys down, and I noticed it immediately because when you've been watching closely, even the smallest shift becomes impossible to ignore. "Get ready," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "We're going to finalize everything today." And I nodded slowly, lowering my eyes just enough to match what he expected to see, but inside, everything was clear, steady, waiting. The drive felt different this time. Shorter somehow, quieter, no soft explanations, no careful reassurance, just silence. And when we arrived, I saw it again, the same building, the same entrance, but this time it didn't feel like a visit. Inside, the air felt heavier, the same clean scent, the same soft walls, but now there was movement behind it. Staff preparing, papers ready, a woman waiting at a desk with a folder already open, my name visible even from where I stood. My son guided me forward, his hand steady on my arm, and I led him one step at a time, calm, quiet, exactly as they expected. "She's been declining," he said, his voice controlled, practiced. "We've discussed this already." And the woman nodded, her pen ready, her expression neutral, as if this was routine, as if I was just another case moving through a system that didn't ask questions. And then, just as the pen touched the paper, a voice interrupted. "Excuse me." It wasn't loud, it didn't need to be, it was clear, steady, and it cut through the room in a way that made everything stop. We all turned, and there they were, standing just inside the doorway, the person I had called, not alone, but with someone else beside them, someone official, someone who didn't look confused or uncertain. "I think we need to pause this," the voice continued calmly. The room shifted instantly, not visibly, not dramatically, but you could feel it. The certainty dissolving, the control slipping, my son's hand tightening slightly on my arm before pulling away, his composure breaking just enough to show something underneath it. "What is this?" he asked, his voice no longer as steady. And for the first time since all of this began, I spoke. "I remember everything." The silence that followed, the moment the truth finally settled in that room, it didn't arrive loudly, it didn't break anything apart. It simply stood there, undeniable, leaving no space for explanation or excuse. My son didn't speak at first, his eyes searching my face as if trying to find the version of me he had convinced himself was real. But it wasn't there, not anymore. And I could see it in the way his expression changed, slowly, the certainty giving way to something else, something closer to realization. "I was never forgetting," I said quietly, my voice steady, not raised, not shaking, just clear. "I was watching, and the words didn't need force because the truth carries its own weight." The documents were still on the table, the pen untouched now, the room no longer moving forward, just paused, caught between what was planned and what was real. The person beside the one I had called stepped forward, calm, professional, asking questions that didn't allow simple answers. Questions about consent, about medical proof, about decisions made without clarity. And I watched as everything they had built so carefully began to come apart, not dramatically, but piece by piece, the way quiet truths do. My daughter lowered her eyes first. My son didn't. Not immediately. But when he finally did, it wasn't anger I saw, it wasn't defiance, it was something heavier, something harder to hold. "Regret." "I thought it was easier this way," he said, his voice quieter now, not the same voice I had heard before, and for a moment I felt it, not forgiveness, not yet, but something close to understanding. Because I had lived long enough to know that people don't always choose cruelty, sometimes they choose convenience and only later realize what it cost. "I know," I answered softly, "and that was the truth of it. I knew, not just what they had done, but why. And somehow that made it both heavier and clearer. I didn't go with them that day. Not to that room. Not to that place. Instead, I walked out of that building slowly, my steps steady, my mind clear. The air outside feeling different against my skin, like something I hadn't realized I was missing. In the days that followed, things changed, not all at once, not perfectly, but enough. Conversations became real again. Not careful, not controlled, just honest. And honesty is not always comfortable, but it is always necessary. My son spoke less at first, then more. My daughter cried, then listened. And I stayed. Not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I chose to. Because in the end, the hardest truth wasn't what they tried to do. It was how close I came to disappearing without ever being gone. And if there is one thing I understand now, something I wish I had seen sooner, it's this. Sometimes people don't take your voice all at once. They do it slowly.